About 2 years ago now, I made a video on depreciated supercars that you could buy for under £100,000. But that was before the prices of cars went pretty mental. And though yes, the used car market is starting to dip finally, maybe a little bit, there are some very different cars that fit into that 100k category today. How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video on depreciated supercars that you can buy for under 100 grand. Wore my Ferrari top today just to celebrate the occasion. Don't forget that I'm in the UK, so prices in other countries may be different, and whenever you buy any second-hand car, maintenance, repairs, insurance, road tax, all that good stuff is important to remember. I'm getting harassed by my cat. If you enjoy this kind of content, please do hit the like button. I would really appreciate 1,000 likes in this video, and so would Simba right here, so I can keep him living a life of luxury. Let me know if you had 100 grand, you could only buy one car, what car would you buy? Subscribe as well if you're new here. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's get this video started with the Aston Martin DB11, which is a 5.2 litre V12 engine that produces 600 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds, making it the slowest car to 60 on this list, despite that insane power figure. It was brought in to replace the outgoing DB9 and on release caused a massive stir, with reviews generally agreeing that it was an amazing grand tourer and that clearly Aston Martin were heading in the right direction with their newfound ties to Daimler. Visually, you can see a clear shift from previous Astons, updating them to look that much newer, and this design language is also translated over onto the newer Vantage. The new design language is also responsible for making the interiors much nicer, and the DB11 really does look good in there, at least in my opinion. Considering these are over 150 grand new, they now start at around £88,000, and for 100 grand you'll get a lovely 2018 example with around 3,000 miles on the clock. Other than a few going wrong on release, these have been reliable so far. Remember, they are relatively new, so problems may be there for you in future, and owners unsurprisingly do say running and maintenance costs are pretty pricey. Next up is one of my all-time favourite cars, the TVR Sagaris, a car I'd love to own myself one day. It has a 4 litre inline-6 engine that makes 406 brake horsepower and does 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds. This is, in my opinion, the most special TVR that may ever be built, as it really represents the older TVR mindset. The car gets none of the safety features or amenities that you might expect in a car that was effectively 70 grand in 2005 when you take inflation into account. That means no airbags, no driver aids, nothing, and the logic behind this was that these features make drivers overconfident and therefore crash. Very interesting. The T350 laid the foundations for this car, which was originally designed to take part in sports car endurance racing. That should be obvious by all of the mad angles around the car, and arguably the most iconic feature is those side exit exhausts that jut out of the rear bumper. Let me know if you can think of another car with exhaust like the Sagaris. These are very hard to come by, being so rare, but you'll find them listed anywhere from around £75,000 with reasonable mileage. That engine is known to have many problems, and even though the Sagaris is arguably the most reliable iteration, it's still problematic. Also, clutches and synchros are known to go wrong. Last time I did this video, the AMG GT-R was available for under £100,000, but today that's not the case. Instead, for your money you'll get the arguably more practical AMG GT-C, which has a 4 litre twin turbocharged V8 that makes 549 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 3.6 seconds. The GT-C was built to be performance focused over the standard GT, taking from the GT-S, then adding a bunch of extra features to make it that main step on the way to the GT-R. It has a wider body, active rear steering, and overall just a more aggressive look than the standard car, plus the extra power to make it run supercar levels of performance. It is of course a grand tourer and followed the SLS AMG as being the second ever sports car developed entirely by AMG, so it's in good company. These start at around the £85,000 mark, and at 100 grand you get a 2018 example with around 10,000 miles on the clock. There were some issues with them on release with parts missing, but in reality they've generally been very reliable, though some owners have complained about the customer care not being on par with other luxury car companies. You can't have a cheap supercar list without it. It's time for the Lamborghini Gallardo, which takes 7th in this video thanks to its 5.2 litre V10 engine that makes 552 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 3.6 seconds, at least in the second generation. Outside of it being basically every car YouTuber's first supercar, it was Lamborghini's second car since Audi took over the company, and it became the best selling Lambo of all time in its run between 2003 to 2013, which is pretty impressive. The first gen had a 5-litre V10 instead with slightly less power, and the second gen brought about a few aesthetic modifications, most notably around the bumpers which look more Aventador-esque, as well as the extra 200cc's. For your money, you'll most likely be getting into an LP560-4, with the 4 referring to it being all-wheel drive, and the 560 referring to the output in PS. You'll get first gen starting at around £60,000, making this Lambo the second cheapest car on the list, and for £100,000 you'll be looking at a 2013 model with reasonable mileage. Manuals are known to be more reliable than automatic E-gear examples, as it's the clutch in particular that goes. Build quality has been praised, but remember that you are buying a Lambo, expect Lambo-sized bills. Next up is a car that you'll rarely find here in the UK, but the Chevrolet Corvette C8 Stingray is a super exotic car for us, even if it isn't in the US. It has a 6.2 litre V8 engine that puts out 475 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 3.5 seconds. This is the 8th generation Corvette and was the first mid-engined Corvette since inception, and the first GM produced one since the Pontiac Fiero. The whole design looks very different to previous Corvettes, and it's hugely upgraded versus the last generation, putting it really into supercar territory. Another first for this car was the fact that it got right-hand drive examples for us here in the UK as well as Japan and Australia, but they're very hard to come by, and it's seemingly easier to find a left-hand drive import, at least from my searches so far. As I mentioned, they're very hard to come by, but you will find imports starting at around £95,000 with next to no mileage. Early C8s were known to have a few teething issues with the engines, and this did spook some potential buyers, but once these were solved, transmission problems came around. But I'd be more worried about getting one serviced here in the UK, as I fear that might be quite tough. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. A reminder, if you hit the like button down below and it gets to 1,000 likes, I'll make another supercar video, maybe at under 50k instead. And if you haven't already, let me know in the comments down below what car you would buy for under £100,000. I recently had the opportunity to drive a Ferrari California T, and I was incredibly surprised at how much I enjoyed it as a car, and I honestly think it can't be overlooked. It's got a 3.9 litre twin turbocharged V8 engine that makes 552 brake horsepower and does 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. Now the car is designed by Ken Okuyama from Pininfarina, the same man who designed my favourite car, the Enzo, so you're in good company. But honestly, to drive this car was lovely. Smooth but impressive power with actually quite engaging handling. I was able to quite comfortably get the back out on it without feeling like I was going to find myself in a bush. The fact that you can then drop the roof down and cruise on a lovely summer's day makes it all the more fun. I honestly think the California is one of the most underrated modern Ferraris, and I had just as much fun driving one of these as I did a 458. These start at around the £90,000 mark, and for £100,000 you get a 2015 model with around 25,000 miles on the clock. There were some known problems on original Californias, particularly around gearboxes, but in general owners suggest the main thing to watch for if you're in the market is getting the right spec for you. I'm not sure there are many cars that have as big a gap from the most to least expensive examples as the Jaguar F-Type. In this case specifically the SVR, which is a ridiculous sounding 5-litre supercharged V8 engine that makes 566 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. It looks and sounds aggressive with the extra flair on the interior that includes the wing, but in reality this car is focused around being a more practical, exotic car that you could use for more activities than your average supercar. Basically you're supposed to be able to daily drive them, though petrol prices might make that difficult today. That extra flair isn't just aesthetic though, as the package is focused around increasing downforce and reducing potential lift, making the car handle that much better. This is the cheapest car on the list, just beating out the Gallardo, as it starts at around £55,000, and you won't need to spend more than £80,000 to get a low mileage 2019 example. The V8 is actually the less reliable engine of the bunch for the F-Type, with the cam chain tensioner problems and high pressure fuel pump failures, as well as leaking oil from the diff. On to the top 3 now, and it's time for another personal favourite, the Porsche 911 991 GT3, which is just about available within our price range. In 991.1 spec, it has a 3.8 litre flat 6 engine that produces 468 brake horsepower, meaning it will do 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds. The purpose of the GT3 originally was to be a homologation model for multiple Porsche race series, and the 991.1 arrived in 2013 with that engine based on the one that the Carrera S gets. Most of that engine was modified though with bespoke parts made specifically to get performance out of the GT3. Add on the bespoke PDK gearbox built specifically for the car, and you start to get a picture of how focused it really is. That performance is indisputable, pulling 202 miles per hour on full tap and managing 7 minutes and 25 seconds around the Nürburgring, which is unbelievable for a non-RS model. These start at around £95,000, and for sub £100,000 you get a 2014 model with around 20 to 30,000 miles on it. On release there were problems with the engine as a result of a supplier having a production error, era. All cars were recalled and owners got new engines. There have been more durability problems since then though, which Porsche have also addressed, which is worth noting. Just missing out on the top spot, we have the McLaren 570S, a beautiful little car with the classic McLaren 3.8 litre twin turbocharged V8 that makes 562 brake horsepower and does 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. S-badged McLarens are generally sports or super focused, but the 570S was actually more about daily drivability, a bit like the F-Type I mentioned before. Don't assume that means they ignored performance though, as aero was also a main focus for the brand, with the back of the car taking inspiration from the P1, which had more aero than any other production car on the roads at the time. If you want to spend more money and go for something with even more performance, then this car was the platform for the 600 LT, which is also a beaut. On comfort though, they added more storage space and made the car more comfortable with more plush materials to choose from, rather than the typical aggressive stuff you get inside most McLarens. Again, if comfort matters to you, consider going for a 540C instead, which also uses this as its base and costs similar money. These start at around 85 grand, and for £100,000 you'll be looking at a 2017 example with very low mileage. Electrical issues have been the main ones to note based on forums, as well as poor service records by McLaren. Taking the top spot in this video is another staple supercar, the second generation Audi R8 V10 Plus, which has a beautiful sounding 5.2 litre V10 engine that makes 601 brake horsepower, more than any other car on this list, taking it from 0 to 60 in a list topping 3.1 seconds. Not bad at all. Where there was some debate around the first generation being a supercar, the second gen or Type 4S is pretty much certified, sharing its platform and engine with the Lamborghini Huracan, and on the Plus it's literally running the same power as the Huracan. Compared to the non-Plus, you also get a stiffer setup and it weighs a bit less due to many parts being replaced with carbon fibre. On top of that, you get some mad features like the water-cooled front diff and some optional stuff like the carbon ceramic brakes for extra stopping power. These start at around the £80,000 mark, and for your 100 grand you'll get a 2018 model with around 10,000 miles on the clock. Reliability is supposed to be excellent on these, with some naming them the everyday supercar. They aren't cheap to maintain or run or fix if something goes wrong, but from a supercar perspective they are solid. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you like my 10 picks in this category. If I was going to buy a car for under £100,000, I would really like the TVR Sagaris personally. I know it's on this list, but it's a car that I have loved for a really long time. Let me know yours in the comments down below. Massive thanks for watching this as always, and a huge thanks to the patrons for their support. But as always, I will see you in the next one.
Listen.